Welcome back to another episode of Off the Ruck, your weekly rugby breakdown. And today, I'm not joined by co-host Finn. I am joined by another rugby journalist, but one that's far more experienced and more decorated than either of your normal hosts. We welcome into the program Nick Bishop. Nick, we'll get into your decorated portfolio in 1 second, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, John. I'm looking forward to a nice holiday, so this will just contribute to the spirit of it, I think.
Yeah, we'll try to kick you off and send you off on your holiday in the best way possible with great manners, etc., etc. But I just want to run through your decorated portfolio because it is something which, as a rugby journo and budding rugby analyst like myself, really is really interested to read about and then also to look at and then to be able to pick your brain today is an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much for that. But you've worked with the likes of Sir Graham Henry. I'm not sure if he was a sir when you were working with him back in 2001. But nonetheless, you worked alongside Wayne Smith, where he spent some time with the Black Ferns. That's a little bit more recently than Sir Graham Henry. And then you've also worked with recently debated or bandied about Wallabies' possible head coach or coach in any aspect, Stuart Lancaster. And that was with England 2011 to 2015. World on the other side of a Wallaby camp there previously as well with Sir Graham Henry. It's been a few times you've been on the opposite side of the table from the Wallabies, so there's going to be lots to
Yeah.
unpack in that.
Well, we were
Yeah,
hoping that we might find Stuart on the in the green and gold this time around, but it wasn't to be. So it's a shame, really, because I don't think what it would be like coaching against a Lions team and all those Leinster players that Stuart had coached previously. That it would have been, I think, novel would be the polite word, but it would have been extremely testing, I think, because you get to know and love those players over time. So.
yeah, being a coach, I guess more than half of it is man managing, and you have to get really close with players. So I could only imagine that that would be an extremely hard challenge, especially on one of the biggest series and the biggest stages in world rugby. And just to wrap
Mm.
up, you've spent some time recently in the French top 14, as well as writing your own books, which have either been nominated or won National Sports Books Award. So we also, and this is how I know you, you are the main feature writer for RugbyPass, and that's where I write as a columnist as well. So that's how we have our little connection. But I just want to say again, thank you so much for coming on Off the Rock. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's always nice to contribute to any kind of program that's interested in rugby knowledge, isn't it? So, uh,
That is
thank
unfortunately
you
something
too.
that makes you and I very rare in amongst my friends group because it's a lot of rugby league and not that many want to get into rugby union as deep as you and I do. So this is an absolute win for me.
Well, I think
Um,
that's the great thing about an Australian audience as well, that there is a thirst for real rugby knowledge out there, and they're very responsive to it. So I think you're lucky to be an Australian as well in that respect.
Yeah, and that I think there is a definite upswing with the amount of attention that we're getting now with the British and Irish Lions tours just months away, and then also the World Cup in 2027. So there's definitely a spotlight and a microscope as well on Australian rugby. So it's an exciting time to be part of this ecosystem and to bring in people like yourself. That is just going to make it all the richer. And I think we'll start off with how you actually got into the line of work as a rugby analyst, because as I've rattled through your decorated profile, it was a couple of decades ago.
And it was quite by accident in a way. It was an interest in Graham Henry when he first came over to Wales as a national coach. Again, similar with the Lions, he was the first foreigner to coach Wales. And I just started writing to him at the WRU, and for some reason he started writing back. So we kind of formed a letter writing relationship for about, I suppose, a year, 18 months, and then eventually we got to meet. And then he asked me to produce a report on the for the tour of Australia when he was appointed as the Lions coach in 2000. And I had about a year to produce that. 75 pages later, I was on the trip on the plane to Australia, offering analytical support, and also we planned to write a book at the end of the tour, which is what we did. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, I think that what you say, what what Graham Henry was to you back then is what a lot of people in the back in the day called a pen pal. Now, I think technology has come a little bit of a further way to having a pen pal, but I had a pen pal in a school in, I think, Sweden at some point. You had Sir Graham Henry. That's quite a caliber of pen pal to be able to have, just writing back and forth. That's such an awesome story, and it really just goes to show that in this industry, you just have to reach out, and if you don't ask, you don't get. And you see, and you got onto a Lions tour, and I just want to bring in the jacket that you're wearing right now because it will fit into the rest that we're talking. It's a British and Irish Lions jacket, which belonged to whom, if you may clue us in
It
on that.
actually belonged to Graham Henry, and I can show you his initials down here somewhere. There we are. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a GH at the bottom. They
Unmissable.
gave him something that fitted. I think it was a man with a 50-inch chest and length of leg to match. And of course, Graham's about 5'7", 5'8", and so he couldn't find a use for it other than using it as a tent. So he handed it on to me, and I've kept it ever since. And most of the letters have fallen off now, but it's still a good memory despite the problems on that tour.
We are going to get into the British and Irish Lions very shortly, but I'd just like to know that for someone like myself, and then also anyone else out there who's trying to become a budding analyst,
Mm.
what does a typical week, if in a, can you just give us a brief overview of what a week as an analyst looks like for yourself?
Well, I think it was a bit different for me because I'm not working day to day in the network of analysts and coaches, as it were. But yeah, I mean, you're following basically a circular pattern as I showed you in that diagram.
I'll whip up
Uh,
that diagram right now so that people will be able to see it as you talk through.
yeah, and it's just I think as coaches get older and analysts get older, they have to have a sensitivity to how the players are feeling, especially after a big match, and when they can introduce information. So there's a natural lull after a big game in which you have to allow for recovery. And then the process of feeding information is very delicate. So you can't overload players. And you have to use those first. It's usually the Monday or so you'd start feeding information, and perhaps Tuesday or Wednesday you'd be getting onto the field. Because the body tends to understand at a much different rhythm to the brain. So you may think you know something, but it takes time for your body to actually absorb it and reproduce it on the field. So I guess the Tuesday, Wednesday would be the key peak training days. After that, you're just trying to solidify things up to the Saturday. But you can explain more through that diagram, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I will take a little bit of time through that, and it's useful. I think all things which become visual, and then you can find a beginning and an end, particularly when you're trying to explain rhythms or coaching strategies, it definitely becomes more and more handy. I myself now am working with the Shoot Shield side here in Sydney, and I'm finding that to be really, really fun. But at the same time, as you say, it's about when or where you can introduce information to the playing group, and then also how you share that information with coaches when they become susceptible to it. Because I'm sure, as you've known, you've worked with several coaches. Each person has their own way of doing things, and that just means that you, as an analyst, have to be malleable and flexible to be able to fit that accordingly.
Yeah, and I think it's a great motto to simplify as much as possible. And when I've witnessed training sessions, the best ones are always the short, sharp ones. They don't last more than about 40 minutes or so, and everything is very focused and concentrated. So you don't want either the feed of information or the actual process on the field to last too long. You want it to be very, very tight and focused as much as you can.
Yeah, well, Titan Focus is what something is going to have to be the motto really for the Wallabies and the British and Irish Lions because they don't have a great lead in to this series. The Wallabies have one test. The British and Irish Lions have that one test against. I'm not sure if it's actually qualified as a test. I'm unsure that against Argentina there in Dublin. But then they
Okay.
have a couple of games in this against the super teams, and then they head into the three test series in July/August with the Wallabies. So we're going to go straight there. And I guess with the Lion squad being unveiled on Thursday, what was your initial reaction to the squad announcement, and what stood out to you as the flavor that Andy Farrell's trying to captivate in this side?
Well, I think Andy's an experienced coach now with the Lions. He's been on 2 trips as a defence coach, so he knows what's required. And the main thing is to keep yourself in a familiar environment. So I think that's why he's gone for 15 Irish players, including 12 from Leinster, because he'll be surrounded by people he knows, and it makes it a lot easier to get that information into a shape that you want when you already know the people that you're transmitting it to. And that's why you always get coaches in the Lions trips trying to stick with guys that they know, because they know exactly what to expect from them in different situations. And I think that's what he's done. And with 5 Irish coaches on the panel as well, I think we're going to get a fairly distinctive Irish pattern of play.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting you say that because obviously one of the key game drivers at halfback, Jamison Gibson Park, he's Irish and he's probably the prestige number 9 in the world at the moment, according in my eyes at least, with Dupont injured, but running around. And the width on his pass is definitely something that unlocks the Irish attack. And I do enjoy seeing him be able to go down the blind side and be able to pick one of his runners, whoever's in the gap. And I think that's going to be something that feeds into it. But then they've gone with no Irish 10, which is which a lot of people speak as your main game driver. And obviously, I think Finn Smith and Finn Russell are someone that can run systems quite well. Although I think Finn Russell is someone who people have the tendency to say that plays off the cuff, but I think that you'll find that he can vary his game to be able to suit Marcus Smith, maybe more so off the cuff. How do you think that with an Irish system, how do you think someone like Finn Russell or Finn Smith's going to be able to adapt to be able to play in a system like that?
Well, I honestly think that Finn Smith will adapt really quickly because he plays in a very similar system with Northampton, which is coached by Sam Vesty, and it was very much modelled on Leinster of about 2 or 3 years ago. And I think people like Gary Ringrose and Gibson Park and James Lowe will be licking their lips at the prospect of playing outside Finn Smith because he is so good at straightening his angles and bringing other people into the game. And it's something they probably have missed a little bit with Sam Prendergast, I think, that Finn Smith is a little bit more direct as a 10. So he will take a couple more steps forward before he moves the ball sideways or he takes a step sideways. And I think that will give a keener edge to the Lions' attack. So perhaps put him in between Jameson Gibson Park, Sione Tuipulotu or Bundy Aki and Gary Ringrose. And I think you've got quite a midfield there.
Hmm. And before we get carried away with the backs, I'd just like to take a look at the forwards there with you. He's picked quite a mobile pack, and I don't necessarily think that this pack is by any means bigger than an Australian pack, which Joe Schmidt may field. And that may be one of the first times a Lions pack isn't bigger than an Australian side, because that is usually the story. We just aren't the biggest pack
Mm.
nor the fiercest, but incredibly mobile and powerful back row.
Yeah.
You look at Earl, Curry, even the young 20-year-old Henry Pollock, who has redefined the word bolter, really. But then you've also got Jack Cohn and Tiger Byrne, who I think will, rather than playing in the back row, which you can do on the side, the back row, does that kind of speak to a rovier, faster, breakdown heavy back row? How do you see that the back of that scrum shaping the play?
Yeah, I think that will be one area, but perhaps where the England influence will be felt, because England, towards the end of the championship in the Six Nations, were playing 3 sevens in their back row, and they had another one on the bench as well. So they just totally overran Wales in that last half hour because of the sheer mobility of the back 5 forwards. They had Chandler Cunningham South in the second row. Maro Itoje has played number 6 for England. And then they had Ben Earl move to number 12. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying the Lions are going to do that, but it certainly gives an enormous amount of dynamic power to your team when you have that many sevens on the field. And we saw what Henry Pollock can do when he skinned Sam Prendergast, sorry, Sam, on the outside for that try in the Champions Cup semi-final a week ago.
Mm.
So it is a very dynamic unit, I think, that back 5 forwards for the Lions. As you say, it's not reliant on size in any way, shape, or form. So they'll be looking to just outwork and outspeed the Aussies in that area. And it's funny that the contrast is that Aussie actually has the power in that area with people like Bobby Valentini, probably Will Skelton if they pick him.
Mm,
Nick Frost, huge unit, 6'9", 6'10".
mm.
The size is actually on the Aussie side on this tour. So I wonder if we're going to see a slight reversal of the usual expectation, and Aussie will actually try and play it tighter, especially if Taniela Tupu gets back to some form.
Mm. Hopefully, evolve and survive. Survival is what's happening for Australia because we want to do a bit more than survive, but I think surviving is priority number one. And then if we can kick on, that'd be ideal. I then wanted to flip the script and kind of look at the Wallabies from your perspective. Where are you seeing the greatest strengths for the Wallabies from a team side, and also the greatest weaknesses?
Well, I think I mean, with if Joseph Suaalii is fit, I think they will have potentially a good backline if they can fit him in the right place. I somehow doubt that they're going to pick him with Len Ikitau in midfield for this tour, which means he'll probably end up playing 15.
Mm,
If they get Max Jorgensen back on the wing, they've got another potentially world-class player in that position. But for me, I think the big key to this tour is Aussie realizing that they've actually got the strength in the forwards to hurt the Lions in the contact zone and at scrum time possibly.
mm,
Because if they do get Taniela Tupu back to form and they pick Will Skelton and a big number six like Jeremy Williams or Seru Uru, they've got a very large set of forwards there. Angus Bell, 125, 130 kilos, perhaps Brandon Payenga, Mosa at hooker. It could be a
mm.
huge pack. And I know we're not accustomed to thinking of Australia as a side that are going to go and really beat you to death up front, but this could just be it.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's to hoping. I mean, that's definitely what it looks like on paper. But again, on paper doesn't win you rugby games, unfortunately. But I'm glad that you mentioned the scrum really there because it is something which I noticed that you wrote in Rugby Pass this week. You know, do we dare to dream that the Aussie scrum is going to be something to fear? I didn't. That's not verbatim of what your headline was, but that's the gist of it. And I will link that in the description below so that everyone can go and read that piece. It's a long read, so settle in with a cup of coffee. But I'm glad that you went there because someone like who's not he's not underrated. He maybe just is. There are very few people who, size wise and also in fame, probably stand up to Taniela Tupou. But Alan Alatoa has made a miraculous comeback to form after the rupture of his Achilles, which actually robbed him of that World Cup berth, which the Wallabies would have needed him because Daniel Tupa was suffering with a calf. But Alan Alatoa is a tremendous scrummager and now finally in his good form, along with James Slipper, who at 35, I believe, is just finding another gear. He's like wine. He just ages well. So it's just incredible. But I think that like with uh the starting 15s, I think, go quite well against each other, but I think the Lions have far more depth. And if when the Australians start getting to, the third test, it's going to be a bruising encounter. When they get to their second and third options, that's when the Lions are going to be able to pull away. And I think that's a fair reflection of what the squad depth looks like. How do you see it?
I'm glad you mentioned Alan Alatoa because I think he's been a great player for Australian rugby for a very long time, and typically Brumby's way, very understated,
Mm,
works incredibly hard. If you just examine the work he does in and around the breakdown, I mean, he's a perfect complement to Taniela Tupu, who's a much more explosive player and tends to play in bursts, on the carry, defence, and scrum. Alan Alto is there for 80 minutes. He's not going away. But I'm glad people have got to see what he looks like when he scrummages on two legs rather than one. Because
yeah.
I think last year he was trying to scrummage on one leg, and no one can do that. But
Mm,
he's a great player, and I think it's a great compliment they have at tight head prop to have those two guys who, you've got Alan Alato to handle the work rate side of things, and you've got Taniela Tupu to handle the explosive activity.
mm,
But depth is a problem because if either side were to say lose five players apiece over the course of the series, it means only the Lions can win that series.
mm.
Because if the four top Australian players go down, there's just simply not the quality to replace them. And that is the big difference, that Australia are thin at the top end and the Lions are deep because they're
Yeah.
picking from four countries and they can just replace one guy with another. So that's the problem for Australia. And it's probably also why they're talking about keeping their top 25 players out of all of the lead-in matches in the Lions tour, so they don't get injured there. But it does devalue the tour, I think,
Mm.
because something we had in 2001 where we scored about 250 points in the first three or four games.
Yeah, Jesus.
Graham Henry said, he said, I just don't know who's my best team because we haven't had them tested yet, you know?
Mm.
So they've got to keep that balance, I think, about keeping strong teams in Australia to play in the regional matches because it's a big thing having reduced five teams to four, that they want to show that all those four teams are competitive.
Mm. And I think that I think that they've proven this year in Super Rugby Pacific that the 5 into 4 has definitely helped on the
Yeah.
Super Rugby Pacific table, on the margins, on the points differentials. It's definitely helped. There's still a few you can't conjure experience, and I think that's what's mattering in some key positions. So I think that's where the win-loss ratio is really hurting. I think for Queensland, it's a little bit more about game management from top down, but it's looking like it's going to be better than it would have been if the Lions came 1 or 2 years ago. So I'm very happy about that. I guess I'd also like to ask you just on this British and Irish Lions tour, where you see if you see any particular Australian talent that maybe vice versa, maybe one talent for the British and Irish Lions that people in Australia might not know, and then someone in Australia who you're really excited to see play, who maybe hasn't really gotten that opportunity in a while or not yet in an Australian jersey.
Well, I think from the Lions' point of view, I mean, Henry Pollock is the obvious one because he's only been playing, I think he's only played about a dozen or so senior matches. He was in the under
Mm.
20s at the beginning of the season for England. So I think there'll be a lot of fascination about him because he's a game changer, basically. And he's got the confidence to carry it off as well. So I don't think he'll be in the least intimidated by playing in this kind of arena. I think he'll thrive on it, you know?
Plenty of swagger.
Yeah. And Finn Smith, I think, is the other guy who, he's the sort of player that makes everybody around him better.
Mm.
And players like that can go unnoticed, but I think this could be a coming of age. And I think it'll be a titanic battle between him and Finn Russell as to who gets that Test number 10 jersey,
Mm.
because I think he just fits with what the Irish team does so well, probably better than Finn Russell, in fact. Um, for Aussie, I want to see Max Jorgensen play because he's been touted ever since he came on the senior scene as a great talent, but we've never really seen it in full bloom yet. So this could be a coming of age for him if he can get back from his long injury in time. So I think those are the guys I'm keenest to see. I've got no doubt that Joseph Suaalii will do well, because I think he's just built for this sort of game. But no, those are the youngsters, I think.
Yeah, I wrote a piece for Rugby Pass a couple of weeks ago, I think last week, where I compared the youngster battle between Pollock and Suaalii, both 21 and 20 years old. That matchup alone between swagger and excitement is worth the price of admission because on a
Yeah.
stage like this, it's just going to be awesome if they do clash because they're both quite hot-headed. They're both extremely tough and confrontational. I think it's just going to be good cinema, really, and that's what rugby needs.
Yeah. Just remembering back to 2013, those clashes between Israel Folau and George North, I mean, they were worth the admission price. And he liked those hand-to-hand battles, the combats, medieval jousts. They really add something, don't they, to the appreciation of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I thank you and we say goodbye to this, I'd just like to get your point on something that I've observed in the British and Irish Lions squad. It's that the wingers are quite powerful and large. You've got Duan van der
Yeah.
Merwe, James Lowe, and also Tommy Freeman. Mac Hansen, the injured one, probably the luckiest one out of the bunch to be able to make it considering his injury, and then also probably form that goes that you don't really have one when you're injured. I think for the
Mm.
the Wallabies have a pace edge on this, but they're going to have to be really good tacklers because James Lowe, Duan van der Merwe, and Tommy Freeman are powerful athletes.
They are, and they're dynamic as well. I mean, you see the amount of tackles that Tommy Freeman, Van der Merwe, and Lowe break. That's how they get their results, you know. I mean, they may not be able to skin people on the outside like a Jorgensen, perhaps, but they can do it other ways. And they're very good footballers as well. I mean, you look at someone like James Lowe, he's really a rounded footballer now. You know, he passes well, he kicks superbly off his left foot.
Crucial.
And he's got that running ability and offloading ability in contact as well. So Irish teams, particularly in the last few years, have had a habit of picking guys who are all-round athletes. And Mac Hansen is the same, but in a different way. He's not big and powerful, but he played a lot of number 10 when he was at the Brumbies. So he's got those distribution skills. So I think there's a pattern there of Ireland in particular looking for guys who can do more than just finish out on the wing. And they want to play these guys. You see James Lowe and Hansen will appear in midfield a lot for Ireland and be used as a distributor. So I think that's the thinking behind it.
No, it's I mean, I hope that they've made a miscalculation for our sake because those wingers are dangerous, but it all remains to be seen, and that's what's so exciting. So much rugby yet still to be played, and the tour is like, you know, it only starts in a little bit over a month with the Brumbies game happening there, so it's going to be super exciting. But I just want to get a little take. What's your take? What's your bet? Who takes the series?
Uh, I think it'll be a close series actually now. I thought it was going to be 3-0 to the Lions at first, but I think it could be 2-1 now.
Alrighty, that's
A
pretty
final
spicy.
test.
We'll take that. Close contest. I'd just like to say thank you so much once again, Nick, for taking the time to join off the rock to chat with me, a budding rugby analyst, someone who's you know, you just need to read the profile and the resume and just be like, wow, where I could be in 20 to 30 years. But I just want to say thank you so much again, and I hope to talk to you again soon. And I hope you enjoy all the rugby that you're working with and also that you're doing, but most of all, enjoy the holiday that you're going on.
Thank you very much, John. It's been a pleasure.